Dmitry Peskov, welcome to the program. Can I start by asking you, we're, as I said, nearly 4 weeks into this war. You, by all intelligence, I guess, experts, are somewhat stalled, certainly around Kyiv and in other parts. There seems to be low morale amongst your troops. There seems to be equipment breakdowns and command and control issues. My first question is, what does President Putin think he has achieved in Ukraine to date?
Well, first of all, not yet. He hasn't achieved yet, and we're speaking about special and military operation that is going on, and it is going on strictly in accordance with the plans and with purposes that were established beforehand. And of course, well, first of all, I think we have to speak about the reasons for this operation. I mean, because speaking about the morale against our amongst our military. Of course, you operate data and information coming from different media and from your intelligence, but you would probably have to doubt this information. You have to doubt it, and you have to think twice whether it is true or not.
Well, here's the thing, Mr. Peskov. Intelligence that really predicted the invasion turned out to be true, despite what you all told us, from the Kremlin. So let's just get past that. We've also heard, civilians and journalists who've seen Russian troops and who've recounted. But that's be that as it may. When you say he hasn't achieved, President Putin hasn't achieved yet, what do you foresee? Because this was going to be, according to your own side, in the press, in the state-sponsored media in Russia, a pretty quick operation. It was even suggested that, within a couple of days that, quote-unquote, Ukraine would return to, quote-unquote, Mother Russia. What has gone wrong, and what do you see for the next phase of this?
Well, of course, no one would think from the very beginning about a couple of days. It's a serious operation with serious purposes, and I think if we try to remember those purposes, those main goals of the operation, it's to get rid of the military potential of Ukraine, and actually this is why our military are targeting only military goals and military objects on the territory of Ukraine, not civil ones. Russian military are not hitting civil aims, civil targets. Number two is to ensure that Ukraine changes from entire Russian center to a neutral country. And in this sense, let's remember that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, actually the neutral status was fixed in a declaration of independence of the country. Number three, to get rid of the nationalist battalions and nationalist regiments who are now opposing Russian troops, who are now trying to cover themselves under the shield of civilians, thus paving a way for civil casualties.
Dmitry,
and also, I beg your pardon, if you let me, and also to ensure that Ukraine acknowledges the fact that Crimea is also an untakeable part of Russia, and that People's Republics of Lugansk and Donetsk are already independent states, that Ukraine actually has lost them after the coup that happened in 2014.
Okay, so basically you are putting and laying out the original demands from President Putin, which I understand seem not to have changed. Let us talk about civilian infrastructure. Look, I know you guys say that you're not targeting civilians, and you've just told me it was a special military operation, which is, I know, what the Kremlin military censorship demands. It is a war and it is an invasion, and we're all watching it all over global television, no matter what you tell your own people. There are so many civilian targets that it's hard to count them right now. And, you may deny it, but even the Chinese, Dmitry, even the Chinese who are your friends, have expressed a very, very deep concern about civilian targets. Let me just read what the Foreign Ministry has said. It is deeply grieved to see the conflict between Ukraine and Russia and highly concerned about the damage done to civilians. They are very, very concerned. Those are your friends, the Chinese, not weirdo journalists or anybody who's actually watching it with their own eyes and can tell the truth. So the real question is, what is President Putin's strategic goal in blasting the civilian infrastructure of places like Mariupol, which we are watching turn to smithereens for the last several weeks now? What's the strategic goal?
Well, the strategic goal is to clear up the Mariupol from nationalistic regiments who are there in a heavily covered environment. And by the way, they're simply not letting people out from the city, from the town. And this is a problem because now we're receiving lots of refugees coming from there. And they simply tell us, they're eyewitnesses. They simply tell us that they were used like a shield. They were used under heavy bombardment. And then those nationalists, they were killing people who would want to leave the city. And now the main goal is to get rid of those bad guys there.
Dmitry, we also have reporters who are quite close to Mariupol, and they are watching because actually some civilians are getting out right now. And they obviously tell a completely different story, that they have been prevented from getting out. And we know that any attempt to establish any kind of humanitarian corridor has collapsed under the weight of Russian shelling, even when you give assurances. There is no food going in, and your own defense ministry said these last few days that only if Mariupol surrenders will they allow food, water, medicine to go in there. I've covered a siege, probably the longest in modern history, the siege of Sarajevo. So I know the playbook very, very well. So the question is, why are they then coming out and telling us that? But also, there are reports that Russia is taking civilians and citizens from Mariupol, taking them over to Russia, and in some cases putting them, way out in the hinterlands and to work. In perhaps work camps, I don't know, but putting them to work.
No, this is not true. This is not true. It's a fake. It's a fake. And then well, believe me, we're all living, not only under the circumstances of military operation. We're living in a severe informational war, a war of fakes. And then, well, you have to know the situation from the outside, from the inside, and sometimes it's very hard to understand what is going on there. So, and if you're journalists, and we're receiving information there from our military information, and then we know what is being said by the people who were well led by those nationalistic regiments to leave the city, and then so it's very desperate stories that they're telling us.
Why do you think most Russians who are able to get out of these horrendously besieged areas and horrendously shelled areas, why do you think they're fleeing west? They're trying to get out to other parts of Ukraine and to the west rather than fleeing to Russia if they feel so safe with you. Why do you think that's happening?
Part of them is going eastwards, part of them is going westwards. It's a choice of people, and no one is making any obstacles.
Let me put it this way then. Let's just say you believe all of this. You've just talked about a disinformation war. Russia is known to have perfected the disinformation war ever since it was the Soviet Union. Russian propaganda is incredibly effective, incredibly effective. Let's just say that your people believe it. Let's just say that they believe all this stuff that you have said as a reason for this war, for this invasion, whatever you call it, special military operation. How then do you square the circle that something like 90% of the Ukrainian people asked believe that they will win, and that barely a single one of them has collaborated, has surrendered, has shown anything other than a fierce patriotic fervor to hold on to their country and to hold on to their sovereignty and their Ukraine. Are you surprised? Is the President Putin, surprised by that?
Well, first of all, you are mistaken. There are Ukrainians who are collaborating. There are Ukrainians who are in cooperation with our military. There are Ukrainians who would like to avoid any casualties and who are in contact with our military, whether they like it or don't, but they understand, because it was declared that if you don't aim our target our military, if you're not trying to kill them, no one is going to hurt you. We will hurt, but we will hurt those nationalistic Nazis. We will hurt Nazis, not ordinary people and civil people. It is forbidden to target civil people for our military. So, and then partly they are in cooperation with our guys. So you're simply mistaken. And speaking about propaganda, starting from a great school of the Soviet Union, I would say that masterpieces of propaganda that we're witnessing now in the West is a good school for us, and we're not that good pupils. I mean, I can even ask you why, for example, CNN is that single-sided in covering this story.
Well, you lead me then to I wasn't going to get there, but if you would allow, journalists to come into Russia and actually report this in a truthful way rather than heavily military censorship, we would be able to report much more of your side. But let's park that for the moment and let's carry on. President Putin, first and foremost, you have seen it, Dmitry. I know that you're watching international news. I know that you watch it. Whatever the Russian people see, you have seen the Ukrainian people refuse to surrender. Every single time your forces issue an ultimatum, not an invitation, an ultimatum, they simply refuse to surrender. And I'm not talking about troops. I'm talking about old men and women. I'm talking about young people. I'm talking about kids. They just won't surrender. This is something that has surprised and impressed, actually, the whole world. So let me just quickly ask you, again, what is the end game? Is it to occupy Ukraine? Can you actually do it with the number of troops that you have? Do you really think that even if you win a battle here or there, that you can win a long war?
Occupation is not among the aims of the operation that were stated.
Right. Okay. Well, that's that answer then. Let me ask you again about, we're trying to get to the truth, right, Dmitry? So I'm going to actually let me just ask: do you see President Putin often? I mean, you're his spokesperson. We know that you're obviously a close official, close confidant. Do you see him often? When was the last time you saw him?
Well, we are in a contact on daily basis.
Face to face? Sorry, it's just interesting.
Sometimes face to face, sometimes on the telephone. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you this question about the Ukrainians, because several analysts are watching, and they have listened to what President Putin has said about Mother Russia, about a fraternal Ukraine, or a Ukraine that actually doesn't exist and has no right to exist. And they're wondering whether the president is getting very angry with the Ukrainians. They're wondering whether there's a sort of a punishment against the Ukrainians being leveled. I spoke with the Finnish president, Sauli Niinisto, who, as you know, has met many times with President Putin. And he described to me what he felt was a sense of growing, I'm going to use, well, hatred is what he said, by President Putin for the Ukrainian people, for the Ukrainian leadership now.
No, he's not angry with Ukrainians. And no one here in Russia is angry with Ukrainians. He's angry with those people in Ukraine who want to be part of NATO and who want to deploy American nuclear missiles on their territory. And he's angry with those people in Ukraine who forbids people to speak Russian in their country, including those Russians who are living in Ukraine for ages. He's angry with those people in Ukraine who carries symbols of Nazis on the streets of Kyiv and Lvov. And he's crazy with he's angry with the Ukrainians and those people in Ukraine, well, who would want to speak with the world, with the Minsk negotiations group, years and years without implementing any obligations.
Well, look, you know, President Putin tore up the Minsk Accords by deciding to do what he wanted to do. And as you know, President Zelensky has already said several times in the last few weeks that he knows there is no NATO on the table for Ukraine. So all the other things are presumably negotiable, what you've just said about neo-Nazis and signs and language. But you know also that neo-Nazis or ultra-nationalists, which do exist there, are a very, very small group that barely won any percentage in recent elections. So it's kind of a straw man. But you mentioned nuclear. You know better than I do that Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in 1994 to Russia, and Russia was meant to defend it according to the agreement in Budapest, Bucharest or Budapest, I'm sorry, I can't remember, not to attack it. But it's President Putin who has put the nuclear card on the table. Can you tell me and tell the world whether you believe President Putin is trying to scare the rest of the world and Ukraine by mentioning the nuclear option? Can you tell me that? And can you tell me that he would never use a nuclear weapon?
Two things. I would disagree with you. Firstly, President Putin was not the one who ruined Minsk Accords.
Okay.
That was Ukrainian side. This is number one. Number two, Ukrainian, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, handed in all the nuclear weapons to the Russian Federation. But unfortunately, in the year of 2022, just a couple of months ago, in Munich conference, President Zelensky started to speak about possibility of generating a nuclear arms on the territory of Ukraine. And most probably you have witnessed that.
I was actually there, Dmitry, and I actually interviewed him, and I do remember him saying, look what we have got for giving up our nuclear weapons. And the real issue is now, what do you expect other countries to do when you ask them to give up their nuclear weapons? Because, you know, territorial integrity and sovereignty has been violated. Again, even your friends, the Chinese, have said they respect every nation's territorial integrity and sovereignty, including Ukraine's. Could I quickly ask you, though, I need to ask you this, because the world is afraid, and I want to know whether Putin intends the world to be afraid of the nuclear option. Would he use it?
President Putin intends to make the world listen to and understand our concerns. We've been trying to convey our concerns to the world, to Europe, to the United States, for a couple of decades, but no one would listen to us. And before it is too late, it was a decision to launch a special operation, military operation, to get rid of entire Russia that was created next to our borders.
What? To get rid of Russia?
Anti-Russia. Because Ukraine started to be, it was formed by the Western countries, anti-Russia.
Okay.
This is the problem.
Okay. Look, Ukraine is a country, sovereign. It's recognized by the United Nations. It's been around for a very, very long time. But I just want to know, I want to ask you again, is President Putin, because again, the Finnish president said to me that when he asked Putin directly about this, because President Putin has laid that card on the table, President Putin said that if anybody tries to stop him, very bad things will happen. And I want to know whether you are convinced or confident that your boss will not use that option.
Well, we have a concept of domestic security. And, well, it's public. You can read all the reasons for nuclear arms to be used. So if it is an existential threat for our country, then it can be used in accordance with our concept.
Well,
there are no other reasons that were mentioned in that text.
So you are basically saying only an existential threat to your country. I still don't know whether I've got a full answer from you, and I'm just going to assume that President Putin wants to scare the world and keep the world on tenterhooks. What about chemical and biological weapons? The United States has said that they believe that there's intelligence that a frustrated President Putin, lack of progress on the ground, may be preparing to use chemical or even biological weapons against Ukrainian troops, civilians, or its leadership.
Well, unfortunately, we have a very strong reason to believe and a very strong evidence that the United States have been developing biolabs programs on the territory of various countries around the Russian Federation, including the territory of Ukraine. This is quite a sophisticated and quite a dangerous biolab program that was led top secret by American specialists. This is reality that we're facing.
Well,
and when it comes to biological and chemical weapons, we don't have these weapons anymore. In the year of 2017, if I'm not mistaken, it was destroyed completely in accordance with international agreements.
Dmitry Peskov, the United States and allies completely deny that. Basically, you know, there are no Ukrainian biological weapons laboratories, not near Russia's border, not anywhere, says the UN ambassador. Only public health facilities proudly supported and recognized by the US government, the World Health Organization, and other governments and international institutions. They believe this is part of your disinformation campaign, which confuses issues. Can I ask you the following? Before the invasion, yourself and several other high-ranked Russian officials denied to the whole world that there was going to be anything like this and accused all the rest of the world of being hysterical. In November, you responded yourself saying, such headlines are nothing more than empty, unfounded escalation of tension. Russia poses no threat to anyone. Your EU ambassador, Chizov, 8 days before the invasion, says, I can assure, as far as Russia is concerned, there will be no attack this Wednesday. There will be no escalation next week or the week after or next month. And your Deputy Foreign Minister, Sergei Ryabkov, shortly after negotiations with the Americans and other side in January, said the following, and here's his soundbite.
Look, I do believe that there is no risk of a larger scale war to start to unfold in Europe or elsewhere. We do not want and will not take any action of aggressive character. We will not attack, strike, invade, quote unquote, whatever, Ukraine.
Dmitry, those are all emphatic denials of any such intention, very close to the day of the invasion, and as what now turns out to be very accurate intelligence was telling everybody that this was going to happen. So I guess I can't ask you why the lies, but what I want to ask you is, after all those lies, how do you expect Russia at the highest levels to be taken seriously now? What can one believe about what's coming up next and about what you all say about what, you know, what's next, you know, in terms of negotiations or the situation on the ground?
Well, yes, we have said that. And we have said that hoping that Ukraine will never get prepared for a strike against Donbass. Yes, we have said that, hoping that at the end, there will be a breakthrough in Normandy process, in Normandy format. And but after that, in couple of days, there was perfectly clear for us, there was perfectly clear for our military specialists that Ukraine was going to launch an offensive against Donbass. That Ukraine, by the way, before the end of the operation, Ukraine have concentrated more than 120,000 military personnel at the border, at the division line. And there were clear signs that an offensive was going to start. So this was the reason. This was the reason. Like elsewhere, like everyone in the world, till the last moment, we never wanted to believe. We never wanted to believe that, to that grave sense, no one would listen to our concerns, and no one would warn Ukrainians not to do that. No one would push Ukrainians towards the solution within a framework of Normandy process. But no one did that.
Okay, well, you know, there are all these foreign leaders. We know that both presidents went to France to talk about this. None of the intelligence that we heard suggested any such build-up by Ukrainian forces. In fact, the opposite, with President Zelensky saying, no, 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 it's not going to happen, stay calm. In fact, Western intelligence was concerned there wouldn't even be a defense from Ukraine. They hadn't even been prepared for what was coming their way. Is the president surprised at the level of defense and resistance by the Ukrainian forces?
Well, near the Donbass, actually the level of resistance in Donbass shows that they were quite well prepared, but they were not well prepared for the defense. They were preparing for offensive operation. Okay. This is the case.
Right. Well, here's the thing. They've held you off for nearly 4 weeks. Who knows what's going to happen in the future, but you are a much more powerful military. So that constitutes resistance and defense in most understandings of that. Can I finally ask you, Alexei Navalny has been sentenced, I believe, to 9 years in maximum security. People on the streets of Russia have been, you know, hoovered up and detained somewhere in the region of, according to the CIA, some 14 to 15,000 Russians. You have prevented independent news organizations from calling it a war, from describing anything about it, other than the defense ministry line and the Kremlin line. My question is, what are you so afraid of Navalny, of journalists, of the truth? What is there to fear?
No. Well, Navalny is a prisoner. He's a prisoner. He had his first sentence. Now he's got his second one, and he's blamed, and it is proven by the prosecutor's office that he's blamed for fraud. So it's purely economical crime. He was collecting money by his foundation from citizens, regular citizens of Russia, and also from abroad. And he was spending part of that money for his personal purposes. This is a fraud in our country, and he was supposed to be punished. And no one is afraid of him. If people is a criminal, he should be in prison. This is the same thing that is happening in the United States and in European countries.
I know you say that. I know the prosecution says that, but the people who allegedly claimed that he was taking their money and using it for himself then said on the stand that they had been forced to make those testimonies. So listen, Dmitry Peskov, I appreciate you being with us. It gives us something of an understanding from your side, and I hope we can continue the conversation.